The December wind cut through downtown Cleveland like a blade, sending discarded newspapers spiraling across the empty sidewalk. Travis Kelce pulled his hood lower, grateful for the anonymity it provided as he walked away from the Children's Hospital Charity Gala. The event had been a success. Another check written, another photo opportunity completed, but something felt hollow about it all. What was it about these formal events that always left him feeling more empty than fulfilled? Was it the scripted speeches, the forced smiles, or was it something deeper? A nagging sense that real change happened in moments like this, walking alone through the streets where people actually lived their struggles? Travis had deliberately chosen to walk back to his hotel instead of taking the team car. He needed air. He needed to think. The season was winding down, and despite all the success, all the accolades, there was this persistent question that kept surfacing. What was he really doing with his platform? As he turned the corner near Cleveland's Central train station, a sound stopped him cold, a voice singing. It wasn't the polished performance of a street musician hoping for tips. This was something different, raw, weathered, but carrying a haunting beauty that seemed to cut through the urban noise. The melody was familiar, an old blues standard that triggered a memory Travis couldn't quite place, but where was it coming from? Travis slowed his pace, scanning the shadowy doorways and alcoves that lined the street. The voice continued, growing clearer as he approached a narrow alley between two abandoned storefronts. There, partially hidden in the darkness, sat a figure that most people would walk past without a second glance. The man appeared to be in his 60s, with a thick, graying beard and clothes that had seen better days, much better days. A torn military surplus jacket hung loosely on his frame, and beside him lay a weathered backpack that looked like it contained everything he owned. His hands, though visibly calloused and dirty, moved with surprising grace as he kept time against his knee. But it was the voice that held Travis transfixed. Even roughened by years and circumstances, there was something unmistakably trained about it. Profession, the phrasing, the breath control, the way he found emotion in every note. This wasn't someone who had simply picked up singing as a survival skill on the streets. Who was this man? And why did that voice feel so familiar? Travis found himself moving closer, drawn by a recognition that hovered just beyond his conscious memory. The homeless man continued singing, apparently unaware of his audience, lost in the music as if it were the only thing that still connected him to who he used to be. And then, in a moment that would change both their lives, the man looked up. Their eyes met across the 15 feet of cracked pavement that separated them. The singing stopped abruptly, and for a heartbeat, neither man moved. Travis saw something flicker across the stranger's face. Surprise, recognition, maybe even fear. "Travis!" The voice was barely a whisper now, but Travis heard it clearly. More importantly, he recognized. The realization hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't just any homeless man singing in an alley. This was someone from his past, someone who had shaped him in ways he was only now beginning to understand. But how had he ended up here? What series of events could have led to this moment? Two people from completely different worlds, yet somehow connected by threads. Travis was only beginning to unravel. The man started to stand, perhaps to flee, but Travis stepped forward. "Wait!" Travis called out, his voice carrying a mixture of disbelief and something else. "Hope, don't go. I think I know you." The homeless man hesitated, his weathered hands clutching the backpack. In that pause, Travis caught a glimpse of the person this man used to be. Beneath the beard, behind the years of hardship etched in his face, there was someone Travis had once known, someone who had mattered. But why couldn't he place exactly where? And what had happened to bring this man to this place, at this moment, when Travis happened to be walking this particular street at this particular time? The coincidence felt too significant to ignore. In a world where Travis was constantly surrounded by people, where every interaction was scheduled and managed, this felt real, unscripted, important. "You probably don't remember me," the man said finally, his voice carrying decades of disappointment and resignation. "It's been a long time," but Travis was already remembering. Fragments of memory were piecing themselves together. A classroom, afternoon sessions, the patient repetition of lessons that had nothing to do with football and everything to do with finding rhythm in chaos. "Oh my God," Travis breathed, the pieces finally clicking into place. "You're..." The homeless man nodded slowly, as if confirming Travis's worst fears and greatest hopes simultaneously. What followed would force both men to confront questions they'd been avoiding for years. For Travis, what responsibility did success carry toward the people who had helped shape it? For the man in the alley, was it possible to reclaim dignity when the world had written you off as irredeemable? As the December wind picked up around them, carrying the scent of approaching snow, neither man could have predicted that this chance encounter would soon become a story that millions would follow, debate, and ultimately be changed by. But first, Travis had to ask the question that was burning in his throat. What happened to you? 15 years earlier, Westwood High School, Cleveland Heights. Travis Kelce had been impossible that Tuesday afternoon. The 17-year-old was all energy and attitude, fresh off a weekend football victory that had the whole school buzzing about playoff possibility. He'd blown into sixth-period music appreciation 20 minutes late, cleats still on, grass stains decorating his practice jersey. "Mr. Kelce," came the patient voice from behind the piano. "Perhaps you'd like to join us." Orion Huxley didn't look like most people's idea of a high school music team. At 45, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had performed on stages much grander than a converted classroom in suburban Cleveland. His salt-and-pepper beard was always precisely trimmed, his clothes pressed despite the modest teacher's salary that afforded them. "Sorry, Mr. H," Travis had mumbled, dropping into the nearest plastic chair, with the graceless enthusiasm of teenage invincibility. Coach ran practice long. What Travis couldn't have known then was that Orion had been watching him for months, seeing something in the young athlete that had nothing to do with his ability to catch passes or bulldoze through defensive line. It was rhythm, the way Travis moved through space, the natural timing that made him impossible to defend against. Orion recognized because he possessed it himself, though his stage and jazz concert halls rather than football. "Tell me something, Travis," Orion had said that day, abandoning his planned lesson to chase an instinct. "When you're running a route, how do you know when to cut?" Travis had frowned, wondering if this was some kind of trick question. I don't know. I just feel it. The timing with the quarterback, the spacing with the defense. It's like hearing music that only I can hear." The other students had snickered, but Orion's eyes had lit up with recognition. "Exactly," he'd said, moving to the piano. "Listen to this." What followed had been unlike any music class Travis had ever experienced. Orion played a complex jazz progression, his fingers dancing across the keys with the same precision Travis brought to his footwork. But more than that, he made Travis understand that what he felt on the football field, that intuitive sense of timing, space, and rhythm, was the same thing musicians felt when they played. The silence between the notes, Orion had explained during one of their after-school sessions, is just as important as the notes themselves. In music, in football, in life. Those sessions had continued throughout Travis's senior year. While other students saw it as punishment, extra time with a teacher, Travis began to understand it as privilege. Orion was sharing something precious, the connection between athletic and artistic excellence, the way rhythm and timing translated across all forms of human expression. But there had been more to their relation than just music theory. Orion had been going through his own struggles that year. His wife Sarah had been battling cancer, a fight that would ultimately claim her life just weeks after Travis graduated. Despite his personal pain, Orion had never missed a session, never let his own heartbreak interfere with what he was trying to teach his student. "Music is medicine," he'd told Travis during one particularly difficult week, when Sarah's condition had taken a turn for the worse. For the person playing it and for the person listening, sometimes it's the only thing that makes sense when nothing else does. Travis had carried those lessons with him to the University of Cincinnati, then to the NFL. The footwork that made him nearly impossible to cover, the timing that made him Tom Brady's favorite target, the ability to find space in chaos, all of it traced back to those afternoons in Orion's classroom, learning to hear the music in movement. But what had happened to Orion after that? Travis had sent a graduation thank you card, had meant to stay in touch, but life had moved so fast. College, the draft, the endless demands of professional athletics. Like so many meaningful relationships from his past, his connection with Orion had faded into memory. Now, standing in this Cleveland alley 15 years later, Travis was getting his answer to what had happened to the man who had taught him to find rhythm in chaos. The budget cuts started the year after you graduated, Orion explained, his voice carrying the weight of accumulated disappointments. Music programs were the first to go. Sarah had been sick for so long that I'd used up all my saving, all our insurance. When they eliminated my position, Travis listened as the story unfolded. A tragedy played out in the lives of countless teachers across America. Orion had tried substitute teaching, private lessons, even wedding gigs, but the music education field was shrinking. The medical bills from Sarah's treatment had crushed him financially. After she died, the house went into foreclosure. I tried to start over, Orion continued, adjusting his worn jacket against the cold. Moved to different cities, looking for opportunities. But when you're over 50 and your profession is being eliminated, he shrugged with the resignation of someone who had fought and lost. The streets weren't a choice, exactly. More like the last option when all the others ran out. Travis felt something breaking open inside his chest. This man had given him tools he used every single day. The mental discipline, the understanding of timing and space, the confidence to perform under pressure. And Travis had gone on to make millions, while Orion had lost everything. How long have you been? Travis couldn't finish the question. 3 years, Orion answered simply. Cleveland, Detroit, Chicago. I keep moving, keep hoping something will change. But there was something else in Orion's expression, something beyond resignation. When he'd been singing earlier, Travis had seen a glimpse of the man he used to be. Passionate, purposeful, alive. The music hadn't left him, even if everything else had. I still teach, Orion said quietly, when kids will listen. Sometimes at shelters, sometimes just on street corners. The music doesn't care where you are when you share it. Travis was beginning to understand that this encounter wasn't just a coincidence. It was an opportunity, not just to help an old teacher, but to answer some of the questions that had been haunting him about purpose and responsibility. But as he looked at Orion's weathered face, Travis realized he was facing a complex challenge. How do you help someone reclaim their dignity without making them feel like a charity case? How do you bridge the gap between worlds that shouldn't be so far apart? The coffee shop Travis chose was deliberately unremarkable. A 24-hour diner near the train station where a famous athlete, a homeless man, could sit together without drawing unwanted attention. At 2 a.m., the clientele consisted mostly of night shift workers and insomniacs, people too focused on their own struggles to care about celebrity sighting. Orion had hesitated when Travis suggested they go somewhere warm to talk. I'm not exactly dressed. He'd gestured at his worn clothes, the smell of the streets that clung to him despite his obvious efforts to stay clean. Neither am I, Travis had replied, indicating his own casual hoodie and jeans. We're just two guys getting coffee. But sitting across from each other in the harsh, fluorescent light of the diner, the distance between their worlds felt more pronounced than it had in the shadowy alley. Orion sat carefully, as if afraid his presence might contaminate the space. Travis recognized the behavior. He'd seen it in homeless veterans at charity events, the way people who had been written off by society carried themselves with defensive apology. Tell me about the music, Travis said, hoping to find common ground. You're still teaching? For the first time since they'd sat down, Orion's posture straightened slightly. There's a shelter about 10 blocks from here. Some of the kids there, they've got nothing. Parents on drugs, bouncing between foster homes, some of them living on the streets too. But they'll listen when you show them how music can be an escape. Travis listened as Orion described impromptu lessons in shelter common areas, teaching rhythm using overturned buckets, showing kids how to find melody in their own voices. Most of them have never been in a real music class. The schools they attend, if they attend, cut those programs years ago, like Westwood did, Travis observed. Worse, these kids are dealing with poverty, violence, addiction in their family. Music becomes survival, a way to process trauma, to imagine something different. Travis was beginning to see the scope of what had been lost when Orion's position was eliminated. It wasn't just one teacher losing his job. It was dozens, maybe hundreds of kids who would never experience what Travis had experienced in that classroom. The understanding that there was artistry in everything, that rhythm and beauty could be found even in the most challenging circumstances. I have an idea, Travis said slowly, an image forming in his mind. But I need to ask you something first. If you could teach again, really teach, with resources and support, would you want to? Orion's eyes sharpened with interest, but also wariness. "What are you thinking?" "There's a school not far from here, Washington Elementary. They've been trying to restart their music program, but can't afford to hire a qualified teacher." "What if—" Travis paused, knowing he was entering delicate territory. "What if we could arrange something? A demonstration, maybe? Show them what a real music education looks like?" The silence stretched between them as Orion considered the offer. Travis could see the conflict playing out across his face. Hope warring with pride, possibility fighting against the accumulated disappointment 3 years street. "I can't just walk into a school looking like this," Orion finally said. "And I don't have—" he gestured vaguely, encompassing everything from appropriate clothes to a permanent address. "We'll figure out the logistic," Travis assured him. "But the question is, do you want to try?" For the first time in their conversation, Orion smiled. Not the careful, defensive expression he'd worn earlier, but something genuine and hopeful. More than anything, Travis pulled out his phone and began making calls. His agent first, then his publicist, then contacts at the NFL's community outreach program. By 4 a.m., they had the skeleton of a plan, a special assembly at Washington Elementary, billed as a surprise visit from Travis Kelce, but actually centered around a demonstration of music education by a master teacher. "There's one condition," Travis told Orion as they prepared to leave the diner. "We do this right. You're not my charity kid, and this isn't about me being a good guy. You're a professional educator sharing your expertise. That's how we present it. That's how we treat it." But even as they shook hands on the agreement, Travis could see new concerns forming in Orion's expression. The man who had faced 3 years of homelessness was now confronting something potentially more terrifying: the possibility of hope. Over the following days, Travis watched Orion transform. With access to shower facilities at the YMCA and a donated set of professional clothes, the dignified teacher Travis remembered began to emerge from beneath the protective armor of the streets. But more importantly, Orion began to remember who he was beyond his circumstance. "I've been preparing for this my whole career," he told Travis the night before the school visit. "Every lesson I taught, every technique I developed, every kid I reached, it was all leading to this moment. I just didn't know it." The Washington Elementary Assembly was scheduled for the following afternoon. Travis had quietly arranged for local media to attend, not to spotlight his own charity work, but to document what he suspected would be something unprecedented: a master class in music education, delivered by someone the system had discarded. But as they drove toward the school that morning, Travis found himself wrestling with questions he hadn't anticipated. Was he helping Orion reclaim his dignity, or was he exploiting his story for his own sense of purpose? What would happen after the assembly, when the cameras left and the attention moved on? Most troubling of all, what if this moment of hope turned out to be cruel? Just another reminder of what Orion had lost? As they pulled into the school parking lot, Travis realized that this wasn't just about giving his old teacher a second chance. It was about testing whether the bridge between their worlds could support the weight of real change, or if it would collapse under the pressure of good intentions and systemic indifference. Washington Elementary's gymnasium had been transformed into something magic. 203rd through 5th graders sat cross-legged on the floor, their energy contained but barely controlled, as they waited for the famous football player they'd been promised. Behind them, teachers, parents, and local media representatives filled folding chairs, smartphones, and cameras ready to capture whatever was about to happen. Travis stood at the side of the makeshift stage, watching Orion make final preparation. The transformation had been remarkable. The confident educator had fully emerged, replacing the defensive survivor of the streets. Orion moved with purpose, arranging simple percussion instruments, testing a small keyboard, organizing sheet music with the precision of someone who had done this thousands of times. "You ready for this?" Travis asked, though he could see that Orion was more ready than he'd been for anything in years. "I've been ready for 15 years, Orion replied, his eyes bright with anticipation. "The question is whether they're ready for what music can do." The plan was simple. Travis would introduce himself and explain why he'd brought a special guest. Then Orion would take over, demonstrating what a real music education looked like. Travis would participate as a student, showing the kids that even successful adults could learn something new. But as Travis walked onto the makeshift stage and saw the expectant faces of the children, he realized this moment was about more than education or charity. These kids, many from the same underserved communities where Orion had been teaching informally, rarely had opportunities like this. For some, it might be their only exposure to formal music instruction. "How many of you love music?" Travis asked the crowd. Nearly every hand shot up, accompanied by excited cheers. "How many of you have music class at school?" The hands dropped. A few tentative waves remained, mostly from kids whose parents could afford private lessons. "I brought someone special today, someone who taught me that music, sports have a lot in common. Both require practice, both require listening, and both can help you find your own rhythm in life." Travis gestured toward Orion, who stepped into the spotlight with the natural confidence of a performer who belonged. "This is Mr. Hux. He's been teaching music for over 20 years. He's going to show us something amazing." What happened next would be talked about in education circles for years to come. Orion began with rhythm, the heartbeat that connects all music. He had the children clap along to simple patterns, then divided them into groups, creating different rhythmic layers. Within minutes, 200 kids who had never played together were creating complex polyrhythms that filled the gymnasium with infectious energy. "Now watch," Orion called out, and began to sing over their rhythmic foundation. Not a children's song, but a complex melody that wove through their clapping like a golden thread through rough fabric. The children's faces lit up with recognition and wonder. They were making real, not just singing along to recording or clapping to simple beats, but actively creating something beautiful and complex. Travis found himself drawn into the demonstration, following Orion's instructions like any other student. He struggled with the more complex rhythmic patterns, missed cues, laughed at his mistakes, and in doing so, showed the kids that learning was supposed to be joyful, not perfect. "Mr. Kelce," Orion called out, slipping naturally into teacher mode. "What do you notice about the relationship between rhythm and your footwork on the football field?" The question led to an impromptu exploration of how athletic timing translated to musical timing. Kids began moving around the gym, finding their own rhythm in walking, running, jumping. Orion showed them how to translate their movements into musical patterns. Then came the moment that would make headlines. "Who here has ever felt like giving up?" Orion asked the crowd. About half the hands went up, a heartbreaking reminder that even elementary school children carry disappointments and defeats. "Music teaches us something important about that feeling," Orion continued. "In music, we have something called a rest. It's a moment of silence, but that silence isn't empty. It's full of potential. It's the space where the next note is waiting to be born." He moved to the piano and played a simple melody, then played it again with strategic pauses, rests that made the music more powerful, not weaker. Sometimes in life, we need those rests too. Times when it feels like nothing is happening, when we're waiting for the next note. But those moments aren't failure. They're preparation for something beautiful. The gymnasium had fallen completely silent. Even the adults seemed transfixed by the metaphor. "Mr. Huxley went through a long rest," Travis said, understanding intuitively where Orion was leading. "But he never stopped being a musician, and now he's here, making music with all of you." For the finale, Orion had the entire audience, kids, teachers, parents, media, participate in a song he'd written specifically for this moment. It was about resilience, about finding your voice even when the world seems to have stopped listening. As 200 voices filled the gymnasium with harmonies that seemed impossible for such a quickly assembled group, Travis felt something shift. This wasn't just a successful assembly or a feel-good story for the evening news. This was a demonstration of what was possible when society invested in human potential rather than writing it off. When the last note faded, the silence lasted for several heartbeats before erupting into thunderous applause. But Travis was watching Orion's face, seeing something he hadn't expected. Not just satisfaction or relief, but a kind of homecoming. This was where Orion belonged, not in the streets, not in the margin, but here, sharing the gift that had never left him, despite everything he'd lost. Principal Martinez approached the stage as the audience began to disperse. "Mr. Huxley," she said, "I don't suppose you'd be interested in discussing a more permanent arrangement." For the first time since Travis had found him in that alley, Orion Huxley looked like a man who dared to hope for a future. But neither man could have anticipated what would happen next, how the video of that assembly would spread across social media, how it would be picked up by national news outlets, and how it would force an entire city to confront uncomfortable questions about how it treated its most vulnerable citizens. 3 maanden na de bijeenkomst op Washington Elementary stond Travis voor een heel ander publiek. De Cleveland City Councilkamer gonsde van de spanning terwijl gemeenschapsactivisten, onderwijsvoorstanders en lokale politici debatteerden over verordening 245b, het Waardigheid in Onderwijs-initiatief, geïnspireerd door het verhaal van Orion Huxley en de virale video die hem tot een nationaal symbool had gemaakt. De video van de bijeenkomst was binnen enkele uren geëxplodeerd op sociale media. Muziekleerkracht dakloos had dagenlang getrend, miljoenen views gegenereerd en gesprekken op gang gebracht over onderwijsfinanciering, sociale diensten en hoe de samenleving mensen behandelt die tussen wal en schip vallen. Grote nieuwsnetwerken hadden het verhaal opgepikt en plotseling wilde iedereen meer weten over de dakloze man die kinderlevens kon transformeren in 1 middag. Maar de aandacht was gekomen met complicaties die nog Travis, nog Orion hadden verwacht. Stadsfunctionarissen, in verlegenheid gebracht door de nationale schijnwerpers op hun falen om een van hun eigen inwoners te ondersteunen, hadden gehaast nieuwe initiatieven aangekondigd voor daklozenopvang en onderwijsfinanciering. Verschillende schooldistricten hadden Orion posities aangeboden, schijnbaar concurrerend om geassocieerd te worden met het feel-good-verhaal. Het probleem was dat niet alle aandacht oprecht voelde. Ze willen me nu inhuren omdat het goed staat op camera, had Orion tegen Travis gezegd tijdens een van hun regelmatige koffiebijeenkomsten in hun gebruikelijke diner. Maar waar waren ze 3 jaar geleden toen ik in deuropeningen sliep? De vraag achtervolgde Travis. Creëerden ze echte verandering? Of namen ze gewoon deel aan een public relations campagne die zou vervagen zodra het volgende virale verhaal de aandacht van mensen zou vangen? In de weken na de virale explosie had Travis gezien hoe de media-aandacht zowel zegen als vloek was geworden. Journalisten verschenen regelmatig bij Orions tijdelijke onderkomen in een transitiewoning, hongerend naar updates over zijn heroïsche transformatie. Talkshow-hosts belden zijn agent, hopend Orion te boeken voor inspirerende interviews. Een uitgeversmaatschappij had zelfs voorgesteld een boek te schrijven, Van straat naar succes, een Amerikaanse droom. Orion had het allemaal beleefd, maar vastberaden afgewezen. Mijn verhaal is niet uitzonderlijk, had hij tegen Travis uitgelegd. Er zijn duizenden geschoolde professionals die dakloosheid ervaren. Het probleem is niet dat mijn situatie zeldzaam is. Het probleem is dat de samenleving doet alsof het dat is. Nu, terwijl Travis wachtte op zijn beurt om de gemeenteraad toe te spreken, keek hij toe hoe Orion vragen beantwoordde van verslaggevers die nog steeds meer geïnteresseerd leken in het dramatische verhaal van zijn val en verlossing dan in de systemische problemen die het hadden veroorzaakt. Meneer Huxley, vroeg een televisiereporter, hoe voelt het om in slechts 3 maanden van dakloos naar meerdere baanaanbiedingen te gaan? Orions antwoord was wel overwogen maar punten. Ik ben dankbaar voor de kansen, maar ik hoop dat mensen begrijpen dat ik dezelfde persoon ben als 3 maanden geleden. Mijn waarde als opvoeder veranderde niet op basis van mijn woonsituatie. Travis had de afgelopen maanden gezien hoe Orion worstelde met de plotselinge roem. De man die 3 jaar in de anonimiteit had geleefd, vond het moeilijk om zich aan te passen aan de constante aandacht. Hij had Travis verteld over slapeloze nachten, bezorgd dat zijn verhaal zou worden gebruikt om andere daklozen te beschuldigen van gebrek aan talent of inzet. De ergste reacties, had Orion uitgelegd, komen van mensen die zeggen, zie je wel, hij was niet echt dakloos, omdat hij educated was. Alsof dakloosheid alleen legitiem is als je geen vaardigheden hebt. Tijdens hun gesprekken had Travis geleerd over de complexe realiteit van moderne dakloosheid. Orion had verhalen gedeeld van mededaklozen, een voormalige verpleegster die haar baan verloor door medische schulden, een IT-specialist wiens bedrijf failliet ging, een veteraan die worstelde met PTSD. De straten zitten vol met mensen die 1 crisis verwijderd waren van stabiliteit, had Orion uitgelegd. Toen Travis eindelijk werd opgeroepen naar het podium, had hij zijn voorbereide opmerkingen laten varen ten gunste van iets directers. 3 maanden geleden vond ik mijn oude muziekleraar zingend in een steeg, begon hij. Het verhaal dat volgde is inspirerend genoemd, hartverwarmend. Een triomf van de menselijke geest. En misschien is het dat. Maar het is ook iets anders. Bewijs van een systeem dat talent weggooit omdat het ongemakkelijk is. Travis keek direct naar de raadsleden, van wie er verschillende speeches hadden gehouden over Clevelands toewijding aan het ondersteunen van kwetsbare inwoners. Orion Huxley werd geen betere leraar, omdat hij werd opgeknapt en voor camera's werd gezet. Hij was altijd zo goed. Het enige dat veranderde was dat mensen eindelijk besloten hem te zien. In de weken voor deze hoorzitting had Travis tijd doorgebracht in andere Amerikaanse steden. Bezoeken aan programma's die probeerden soortgelijke problemen aan te pakken. In Detroit had hij een voormalige schooldirecteur ontmoet die sinds 2 jaar dakloos was na budgetbezuinigingen. In Chicago sprak hij met een kunstleraar die in haar auto leefde terwijl ze invalwerk deed bij 3 verschillende scholen. Het probleem is nationaal, had hij geleerd van onderwijsadvocaten. We hebben duizenden gekwalificeerde opvoeders verloren aan bezuinigingen en de samenleving behandelt hen alsof ze wegwerpbaar zijn. De verordening die in overweging werd genomen zou een fonds oprichten voor noodhulp aan opvoeders die economische tegenspoed ervaren, paden creëren voor ervaren leraren om terug te keren naar het klaslokaal en mandateren dat elke school die stadsfinanciering ontvangt een vorm van kunstonderwijs behoudt. Maar Travis wist dat verordeningen konden worden ingetrokken, financiering kon worden omgeleid en publieke aandacht zou onvermijdelijk verder gaan. De vraag die we onszelf moeten stellen, vervolgde hij, is of we toegewijd zijn aan verandering of alleen toegewijd aan ons goed voelen over onszelf. Tijdens zijn toespraak deelde Travis specifieke verhalen van studenten die hij had ontmoet op Washington Elementary. Een jongen genaamd Marcus, wiens gedragsproblemen dramatisch verbeterden toen hij leerde drummen. Een meisje genaamd Aisha, die zo verlegen was dat ze nauwelijks sprak tot ze ontdekte dat ze een prachtige zangstem had. Deze kinderen zouden verloren zijn gegaan in traditionele systemen, vertelde Travis de raad. Maar muziekonderwijs gaf hen een manier om zichzelf uit te drukken, om succesvol te zijn, om te geloven dat ze waardevol zijn. Na Travis sprak, nam Orion het podium. De transformatie in zijn houding over de afgelopen 3 maanden was opmerkelijk geweest. Niet alleen fysiek, maar in zijn vertrouwen en gevoel van doelgerichtheid. Hij sprak over de studenten met wie hij had gewerkt op Washington Elementary, waar directeur Martinez hem inderdaad een permanente positie had aangeboden. Deze kinderen hebben me iets belangrijks geleerd, zei Orion. Veerkracht gaat niet alleen over het overleven van moeilijke tijden. Het gaat over weigeren die tijden je waarde te laten bepalen. 3 jaar lang liet ik omstandigheden me ervan overtuigen dat ik niets meer te bieden had. Deze kinderen herinnerden me eraan dat de muziek nooit wegging. Ik stopte gewoon met geloven dat iemand het wilde horen. Maar toen verraste Orion iedereen, inclusief Travis. Ik ben dankbaar voor de baanaanbiedingen, maar ik heb besloten de positie op Washington Elementary te accepteren met een voorwaarde. Ik wil een programma oprichten dat specifiek leraren recruteert die zijn ontheemd door budgetbezuinigingen. Mensen die het systeem heeft afgeschreven. Ik wil een model creëren dat andere scholen kunnen volgen. Het voorstel was radicaler dan iemand had verwacht. In plaats van gewoon liefdadigheid en dankbaarheid te accepteren, stelde Orion voor zijn moment in de schijnwerpers te gebruiken om systemische verandering te creëren. Hij legde uit hoe het programma zou werken. Ervaren opvoeders zouden worden gekoppeld aan scholen die hun expertise nodig hadden, met ondersteuning voor huisvesting, transport en professionele ontwikkeling. We verspillen menselijk kapitaal, zei hij tegen de raad. Mensen met decennia ervaring worden behandeld als wegwerpbaar omdat ze een tegenvaller hebben gehad. In het volgende uur spraken andere sprekers de raad toe. Voormalige studenten die waren getroffen door muziekprogramma-bezuinigingen. Huidige leraren die worstelden met inadequate middelen. Ouders die hadden toegekeken hoe hun kinderscholen kunstonderwijs volledig elimineerden. Een bijzonder krachtig getuigenis kwam van Maria Santos, een voormalige kunstleraar die 2 jaar dakloos was geweest voordat ze werk vond als schoonmaakster in hetzelfde schooldistrict waar ze ooit had onderwezen. Ik poet nu de klasselokalen waar ik vroeger kinderen leerde tekenen en schilderen, vertelde ze de raad. De directeur weet niet eens dat ik een master's degree heb in kunstonderwijs. Voor hen ben ik gewoon de schoonmaakster. Wat ontstond was een beeld van een crisis veel groter dan één dakloze leraar. Overal in het land waren muziek- en kunstprogramma's gedecimeerd door budgetbezuinigingen, vaak in de gemeenschappen die ze het meest nodig hadden. Duizenden gekwalificeerde opvoeders waren ontheemd. Hun expertise verloren aan systemen die testscoren prioriteerden boven creatieve ontwikkeling. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, een onderwijsonderzoeker van Case Western Reserve University, presenteerde data die de bredere impact van deze bezuinigingen toonden. Studies tonen consistent aan dat studenten met toegang tot kunstonderwijs beter presteren in alle vakgebieden, vertelde ze de raad. We hebben niet alleen individuele carrières vernietigd. We hebben de educatieve kansen van hele generaties studenten ondermijnd. De verordening werd unaniem aangenomen, maar Travis en Orion wisten beiden dat wetgevingsoverwinningen slechts het begin waren. 6 maanden later stond Travis in een gerenoveerd klaslokaal op Washington Elementary, toekijkend hoe Orion werkte met een groep leraren die waren gerekruteerd via het nieuwe programma. Sommigen waren jaren uit het onderwijs geweest door budgetbezuinigingen, anderen waren onderbenut in scholen die zich hun programma's niet volledig konden veroorloven. Het klaslokaal zelf was getransformeerd. Wat ooit een kale ruimte was geweest, was nu gevuld met instrumenten, muziekstandaards en kleurrijke posters die verschillende muziekstijlen en culturen vierden. De Huxley-methode, zoals het werd genoemd in onderwijstijdschriften, richtte zich op het demonstreren hoe muziekonderwijs algemene academische prestaties kon ondersteunen, terwijl het vertrouwen en gemeenschap onder studenten opbouwde. Travis observeerde een bijzondere les waarbij Orion 10-jarige studenten hielp een rap te componeren over breuken in de wiskunde. Muziek maakt abstracte concepten concreet, legde Orion uit aan de bezoekende leraren. Ritme helpt kinderen wiskundige patronen begrijpen. Rijm maakt vocabulaire gedenkwaardig. Harmonie leert samenwerken. De resultaten waren opmerkelijk geweest, testscoren waren gestegen, disciplinaire problemen waren gedaald en opkomst was dramatisch verbeterd. Maar belangrijker nog, Travis kon de impact op individuele studenten zien. Er was Marcus, de jongen die hij had ontmoet op de eerste dag, die van een worstelde lezer was geëvolueerd naar iemand die gedichten schreef en ze op muziek zette. Aisha, de verlegen zangeres, leidde nu een koor van klasgenoten en was gekozen tot studentenraadlid. Je weet wat het beste deel is? Vroeg Orion aan Travis, terwijl ze toekeken hoe een groep 5e-klassers een complex arrangement uitvoerde dat ze zelf hadden gecomponeerd. Deze kinderen zullen nooit weten hoe het voelt om muziek van hen weggenomen te krijgen. Voor hen zal het gewoon deel zijn van onderwijs, zo natuurlijk als lezen of wiskunde. De impact ging verder dan academische resultaten. Travis had ouders geïnterviewd die opmerkelijke veranderingen in hun kinderen thuis zagen. Mijn dochter komt thuis en zingt voor haar babybroertje, vertelde een moeder hem. Ze heeft hem geleerd te klappen op maat. Muziek is onze familietijd geworden. Het Washington Elementary programma had ook nationale aandacht getrokken. Delegaties van andere schooldistricten kwamen regelmatig op bezoek, lerend over het Huxley-model. Een documentaire filmploeg had 3 maanden doorgebracht bij het vastleggen van het dagelijkse werk van het programma. Maar Travis' gedachten gingen naar grotere vragen. Het Washington Elementary programma werkte, maar het was nog steeds maar 1 school. Hoe schaal je individueel succes naar systemische verandering? Hoe zorg je ervoor dat momenten van inspiratie zich vertalen naar blijvende transformatie? Het antwoord, begon hij te begrijpen, lag niet in grote gebaren of virale video's, maar in het stille, consistente werk van het bouwen van iets duurzaams. De bijeenkomst die alles had gestart was slechts de eerste noot in een langere compositie. Een die jaren van inspanning, tegenslagen en kleine overwinningen zou vereisen om te voltooien. Een jaar na hun eerste ontmoeting had het Dignity in Education Initiative zich uitgebreid naar 15 scholen in de Cleveland area. Het programma had 30 voormalige opvoeders terug in klaslokalen geplaatst en meer dan 3000 studenten bereikt. De financiering kwam van een combinatie van stadsmiddelen, particuliere donaties en een federale subsidie die Cleveland had ontvangen als modelstad voor innovatieve onderwijsoplossingen. Travis was ook bezig met het uitbreiden van zijn eigen rol. Hij had de Second Chance Sports Academy opgericht, een programma dat voormalige professionele atleten koppelde aan scholen om te helpen bij lichamelijke opvoeding en naschoolse programma. Het idee was om hetzelfde principe toe te passen dat had gewerkt voor Orion. Expertise die verloren was gegaan, aan omstandigheden herverbinden met gemeenschappen die er baat bij zouden hebben. Terwijl Travis die middag de school verliet, passeerde hij de steeg waar hij Orion voor het eerst had horen zingen. De ruimte zag er nu anders uit. Schoner, onderdeel van een stadsvernieuwingsproject dat de stad had versneld na de nationale aandacht. Maar Travis herinnerde zich hoe het eruit zag op die koude decemberavond en hij herinnerde zich de stem die hem had geroepen om te stoppen en te luisteren. Hij dacht aan alle mensen die nog steeds in soortgelijke steegjes zongen, hun talenten verborgen door omstandigheden. Het verhaal van hem en Orion was slechts één van vele die wachten om verteld te worden. Voor elke Orion Huxley die een tweede kans kreeg, waren er honderden anderen wiens verhalen nooit het daglicht zouden zien. Deze realisatie bracht geen wanhoop, maar een dieper gevoel van doelgerichtheid. Verandering gebeurde niet in spectaculaire momenten, maar in de accumulatie van kleine daden van erkenning en respect. Elke keer dat iemand stopte om te luisteren naar een vergeten stem, elke keer dat een gemeenschap ervoor koos potentieel te zien in plaats van probleem, werd de wereld een beetje meer zoals hij hoorde te zijn. Soms klonken de belangrijkste momenten in ons leven als iemand die alleen zingt in het donker, hopend dat ergens iemand hen zou horen en zich zou herinneren dat ze ertoe doen. Het verhaal van Travis Kelce en Orion Huxley was meer geworden dan een toevallige ontmoeting tussen een superster en zijn vergeten leraar. Het was een getuigenis geworden van het idee dat geen stem het zwijgen zou moeten worden opgelegd door omstandigheden, geen talent zou moeten worden verspild vanwege systematische onverschilligheid. En geen persoon zou onzichtbaar moeten zijn, simpelweg omdat ze moeilijke tijden hebben doorgemaakt. Uiteindelijk ging het niet over de roem of de feel-good krantenkop. Het ging over de muziek, het ritme van mogelijkheden dat ons allemaal verbindt, wachtend op iemand met de moed om te stoppen en te luisteren.